Well, greetings from St. Louis University and Student Financial Services. My name is Dave Rice. I'm a longtime veteran of financial aid, and along with my wife, we put 3 kids through college. So these things we're getting ready to talk about are not just theory to me. I'll just say we're living the dream with you and your family, if you know what I mean. So let's jump right in. So what's happening tonight? We're going to talk about what is financial aid and the goals, when and how do we apply, what is an expected family contribution, what's an award notice, what is the financial aid timeline. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about. So some of the goals of financial aid. First, we want to reward our students for their achievements. They work very hard, both in and out of the classroom. So we want to reward things like academics, along with some of their outside achievements. We want to evaluate families' ability to pay the cost, because it's very important that we understand that as we try to distribute very limited resources in an equitable manner. We also want to provide a balance between gift aid and self-help aid. So gift aid are the grants and scholarships that we don't have to repay. Self-help aid is going to be the loans and work study. When this whole financial aid process gets to going kind of fast, you just remember this screen. This is financial aid, these 4 things. It's not more and it's not less. Scholarships are the merit-based awards, the rewards for their students' achievements based on academics, based on talents they have, sports, music, theater, different talents they have, community service that they work. Grants are the need-based pieces of aid. The FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, is the foundation for the need-based grants. But need-based grants come from the federal government, state government, and from the schools themselves. We'll talk about 3 different loan programs tonight: federal student loans, federal parent loans, and private student loans. And we'll also talk about work-study opportunities. So how do we apply? The first step is simply when you're applying for admission. Most schools push their initial merit awards out to our students based on criteria that students have at the admission process. Based on GPA, ACT scores. SLU this year was a test optional school, so we relied mostly on GPA. Many schools are doing that now. FAFSA is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It determines the need-based aid eligibility for students for federal aid and plays into the equation for state aid and institutional aid. I also want to mention CSS Profile. While the FAFSA is free, CSS Profile costs $25 for the first school you send it to and $16 for every school after that. But with all the scams that are out there, people asking to pay for this and that, CSS Profile is legit. It's put out by College Board. There's about 400 schools across the country that use it. We do not use it for our domestic students, but we use it for our international students to help try to understand their need-based aid eligibility. So those are some of the different applications, the basic applications that will get you started. Just a few screen prints of the federal aid site. The federal government has moved everything from different sites into one. FAFSA, the loan sites, everything has moved to this studentaid.gov. So just a couple shots of screens here just to get you familiar with it. There's right here is where you can click to apply. You'll apply. This is where you'll see application for FAFSA for your student loans, parent loans. From here, there's just a lot of great information out there, not just about the application process, but just about understanding the aid process, understanding different information about different schools. So great information out there. And yes, indeed, there's an app for your phone that you can download so you can do all of these processes on your phone. When do we start? Just remember October 1st. That's when the FAFSA becomes available. We encourage you to file that FAFSA as close to October 1st as you can, because many types of aid are first come, first served. There's limited amounts of aid in different budgets, and so you don't want to be eligible for something and only to find out you applied too late and those funds were already gone. So just remember, apply as close to October 1st as you can. We also encourage you to use the IRS data retrieval tool as you can when you're filling out the FAFSA. We use prior tax year information when we're filling out the FAFSA. So this year, as we think about filling out FAFSAs for 2022-23 school year, we'll actually use our 2020 tax return information, things that we will have already filed that April before FAFSA is due in October. So we can download that information right into the FAFSA, makes that process much easier, and also confirms that that data we've loaded into the FAFSA is correct. What can we do now? Senior families, you can go ahead and start creating your FSA IDs. You'll need, that is a username and a password. You'll create one for the student, and you'll create one for at least one of the parents. It'll be your electronic signature on the FAFSA, on loan applications, on any of the federal applications. So you'll want to have that, keep that someplace safe. You can use that for your student the entire time they're in college. And as parents, you can use it for all of your students for the entire time they're in college. So keep that someplace safe. There are FAFSA practice tools out there if you want to get a sense of what the results of the FAFSA might be for your family. Really want to make note of the net price calculators. Every school is required to have a net price calculator within a couple clicks of their homepage. We all hear things about the high cost of college, but those are sticker prices. Most, if not all, schools are discounting that sticker price with scholarships and grants. So the net price calculator will help you understand what you might actually pay to attend that college. Screen print of the FSA ID. You can see you're creating a username and a password. This is just where you would go to do that. Many times we either lose our FSA ID or we get locked out, we forget our password. So there's just a quick screenshot to show you it's a simple process to get that reset. So when we fill out the FAFSA, you know, financial aid has more jargon than I think any field known to man. So I don't want to get lost in jargon tonight, but I do want to make mention of two terms. The first one will be EFC, expected family contribution. When we fill out the FAFSA, the results are an EFC. That EFC can be anything from 0 to 999,000. In a minute, we'll kind of get some perspective on that number. But it's just important to know that that is a federal formula. It is not determined by the school. It is a federal formula. That EFC is the same EFC at every school that you're applying to. So just know that that is a federal formula. The other term that I want you to be familiar with is cost of attendance. Cost of attendance represents the maximum amount of financial aid that you can receive from a school. It's made up of direct costs, things like tuition fees, room and board if your students live on campus, and then some cost of living factors, things like transportation, miscellaneous category, books and supplies, loan fees. The federal loans have loan fees, so loan fees are in there too. But it just allows you to generate financial aid and loans at times to cover not just the direct cost, but the indirect costs of paying for college. It's just a visual of that cost of attendance in the EFC. We talk about need-based aid. Well, how does it calculate it? This is just a visual of that calculation. Let's imagine that column 1 there are four-year private schools, maybe the most expensive schools. Column 2, four-year public schools, a little less expensive. In column 3, our community colleges, our least expensive option for college. We see the cost of attendance minus that expected family contribution. It's the same for each school, no matter what the cost is. Cost of attendance minus EFC equals unmet need. So sometimes at the more expensive schools, we have a little bit more room for unmet need that determines our eligibility for some need-based aid. But that's just a visual of how that process works. Don't get lost in all those details, but it's good to have just kind of seen how that works. So the first piece, usually, like I said, just from applying for admission to different schools, you will begin to receive merit-based awards from the schools. And this is just a screenshot of how that works here at St. Louis University, but I would encourage you to think about not just receiving that initial merit-based award, but understanding if there's other scholarships that you might be able to apply for at school. So here at St. Louis University, just by applying for admission, the initial merit-based awards, things that range from about $10,000 to $25,000 are pushed out to students. They're based on GPA. ACT, like I said, we were test optional this year, so focused mostly on GPA. But there are a couple other things that students can apply for. Our presidential scholarship is a full tuition scholarship, has a December 1st deadline for application. Students will write an essay. Selected students will come for an interview. It's an incredible process, but that's an example of an extreme merit-based scholarship. Our Martin Luther King Jr. scholarship is an example of something that is awarded based on community service that our students do. It has a February 1st application deadline. Students also write application for that. Selected students come for an interview. Again, it's a really awesome process, but that's some things that you want to just be aware of. So the thing to make a note of here is as you apply to different colleges, first of all, get to know your admission counselor really well. Pick their brain about what kind of things like this that you can apply for so that you make sure that you don't miss out on any of those opportunities. Different types of federal aid. Federal Pell Grants, we mentioned the EFC number a minute ago, and I said I would give you some perspective on that. I said it could be anything from 0 to 999,000. Well, the federal Pell Grant goes from an EFC of 0 to a little bit over 5,700, and this past year A full Pell Grant for the year was $6,495, and then based on the EFC on a sliding scale of about every $100, that Pell Grant went down about $100 to a little over $1,000. So anything from right at $6,500 down to about $1,000 based on that EFC. There is also, and Pell Grants are portable. So if you receive a Pell Grant, you can shop that at every school that you're looking at. You can know that your student's going to get that. We talked about important to file the FAFSA by October 1st because some funds are first come, first serve, and Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant is an example of those type of funds. Schools receive an allotment of funds from the federal government for this grant, so they run out very quick. We can't even get out of our zero EFCs here at SLU before we're out of those funds. So again, file your FAFSA by October 1st. A lot of times there's priority deadlines of February 1st for these kinds of types of aid because we know that we'll be out of it after that. Also, federal work study is a need-based piece of aid that's a federal award. Work study works different than every other kind of aid. Your students will need to get a job on campus. They'll need to work that job, and then those funds pay directly to your student. Whether there's a balance or not, those funds pay directly to your student as they earn them. They can turn around and use them to pay back toward the balance, but they pay first to your student. Told you we would talk about 3 different loan programs tonight, and this represents the federal student loan program. It isn't a need-based aid program. It's not a credit qualifying program. Simply by filling out the FAFSA, you can know that your student this first year can qualify for up to $5,500. You see 2 columns in this page, a subsidized column and an unsubsidized column. The students of that $5,500 can qualify for as much as $3,500 to be subsidized. The subsidy is that the government's paying the interest on that loan for them while they're in college. But even now, before you fill out a FAFSA, you can know that your student can qualify for up to $5,500 that first year. That amount grows each year, $6,500 for second year, $7,500 for third year, and $7,500 again for fourth year. You see that they have a fixed rate of 3.73%. New rate is set every year. That'll be the rate on those loans borrowed in that year for the life of that loan. There is a federal origination fee of 1.057% on this loan for the coming year as well. These loans are deferred. Repayment is deferred until 6 months after our students are out of school, not just graduation. It's not graduation that triggers repayment. It's dropping below half time for more than 6 months. So full time is 12 hours. Dropping below 6 hours for more than 6 months is what triggers repayment. Normally we think of that at graduation, but just know it's not just graduation that triggers repayment. You know, we used to only have to talk about that $5,500 loan amount, but now your students are taking a lot more credit in college credit while they're still in high school. So really, the first year is 0 to 29 credit hours. If they bring in more than 30 credit hours into college that first year, they would actually qualify for the second year loan amount of $6,500. So work with your admission counselor, your financial aid counselor on the amount of loan eligibility that your student will have for that first year. These are the other 2 loan programs. This is the federal parent loan program and the private student loan program. There are actually private parent loans in this section too. But the differences between these loans are both credit qualifying, but unlike the federal student loans where the government's going to tell us how much we could borrow each year, these loans, you can borrow up to cost of attendance. You can cover not just those direct costs, but those indirect costs as well. Differences in the terms. The parent loan has a fixed rate of 6.28% for this coming year. The private loans tend to be variable. All of these terms vary by lender with the private loans, but most of them are variable. The federal parent loan has a origination fee of 4.228%. That's a federal origination fee that's kept before the loan is dispersed. Most of the private loans, in fact, I don't know of any that have an origination fee, so that's a perk for those. The parent loan can be deferred. Repayment can be deferred while students are in school. It's as simple as checking a box on the application, but if not, they go into repayment 60 days after they're fully dispersed. So half will come in August for the fall, half in January for the spring semester, and that loan then would go into repayment into February, beginning of March. The private student loans are deferred like the federal student loans. They're deferred for 6 months after a student is out of school, 6 months after they drop below half time. If a parent applies for a federal parent plus loan and it is denied, a student would then gain an additional $4,000 of federal student loan eligibility. You know, when we talk about loans, I think it's important to kind of give them some practical framework here. I think in our society, we think in terms of, well, how much is a loan if we're going to, how much is that a month? And so just to give you some perspective. So for the federal student loans, for the interest rate of 3.73 this year, there's standard 10-year repayments on the loans when the students get out of school. So for every $10,000 a student would borrow, that would be about $100 per month. So let's say they borrow $20,000 during the time of their degree, their monthly payment would be about $200 a month for the standard 10-year term. For parent loans at 6.28% for a standard term of 10 years, they would be about $112 a month for every $10,000 that's borrowed. For the private student loans, we'll estimate them at 10%. They can be less than that, but we'll estimate them at 10%. They would be about $132 a month for $10,000 borrowed. So just some perspective on what that means to borrow and how much that might be in repayment. Award notices. The main thing to talk about here is that award notices are not all created equal. Students put different information out, but this becomes the official notice of aid that a school is offering your students. So let's imagine that it's about February, you've gone to the mailbox, and there are 2 award notices there for your student. School A has offered your student about $60,000, and we're pretty excited about this award letter, while School B has only offered them about $30,000. But we need to make sure what is on that award letter. And remember, this is a good time to remember back to the screen I said with the basics to remember. What is financial aid? It is grants and scholarships and loans and work study. So we first want to understand how much of this award letter are grants and scholarships. So as we look at School A award letter, we noticed that $45,000 of the $60,000 is a federal parent loan, a credit qualifying loan. Not that we won't qualify, but it's a loan that's making up the lion's share of this award letter. As we look at School B, of the $30,000 awarded, $25,000 of that are grants and scholarships, and $5,000 is a federal student loan. So in essence, School B has actually offered us the better award. We can still do a parent loan at School B, but we want to understand what makes up the amounts on that award letter. So don't just get caught by that bottom line, and make sure you have those discussions with your student. Your high school counselor, your financial aid counselors at the schools are there to help you understand that award letter if you have any questions. Outside scholarships and college savings plans, so often we hear there's millions and billions of dollars out there in these outside scholarship programs, and we think we're the only family that we're just not going to know the secret handshake or the password, or we're going to miss out on all this. And I'm here to tell you tonight, if you remember one thing, we're not going to miss out on any of these funds. The number one source of outside aid, and I always feel like there should be a drum roll here, but the number one source of outside aid are your high school counselors. They're working very hard for your students, and they're pushing great information to them. Applications, many times they have a part of the website. There's a scholarship suite that they have on their different parts of the website, and they're pushing great information to your students. But make sure your students are following those directions and actually applying for those scholarships. I heard some great advice from a high school counselor a couple of years ago that said they encourage their students to spend about 1 evening a week applying for the outside scholarships. I think that's great advice, because they're going to need maybe a letter from a teacher or something, recommendation letter. And you can't run in the door at the last minute and ask them to do that, because probably like everything else, the same teacher's getting multiple of those requests. So start early. College savings plans, 529 plans. I heard our state treasurer speak a year or so ago, and he was really pushing the benefits of the 529 savings plans, the tax benefits. So even if you haven't started saving in those plans yet, even now, go ahead and start utilizing those programs, and there's a great tax benefit there. Some of the just outside scholarship searches, your high school counselors will push the local ones to you. That is the greatest source of private scholarships, but there's some other big ones that have the GATE scholarships and the Coca-Cola scholarships, and all of life is paid for kind of scholarships. Those are exciting, but so are the smaller ones as they stack up, and don't miss out on those opportunities just because a scholarship might be a little bit smaller. All right, so let's kind of bring all of this together. No matter what school you're looking at, no matter what the cost of the school, the process is going to work like this. We're going to have cost. From that cost, we're going to subtract our aid. And for right now, let's call that aid our grants and scholarships. Not a lot of decision there. We want all of that free money that we don't have to repay. probably in many cases, we're going to need that federal student loan. So right now we'll call aid our grants and scholarships and our federal loan. So cost minus aid. What do we do if there's a remaining balance? And again, we think there must be 1,000 different ways and we're not going to know or we're going to miss out, but you're not. It's actually very, very simple. There are 3 ways to cover that remaining balance. We can cover it with a payment plan, a parent loan, or a private loan. We can pay now, we can pay a little bit later, we can pay after our students finish with their degree. Payment plans can be split into 5 payments per semester usually. So let's call that 10 payments for the year. Let's think in terms of covering a balance for a year. So let's just say we had a $10,000 balance for the year, 5,000 fall, 5,000 spring. So I'm not a great math genius, but a $10,000 balance divided by 10 payments would be about $1,000 a month. And for some of us, that works great for our budgets. Others, that doesn't work. So what's the next option? Well, we could think of a federal parent loan. And if we borrowed $10,000, as we saw before, we know that that payment would be about $112 a month. Or we could look at doing a private student loan, and we could kind of put the payment of that off until after our students are out of school, and we know that that would be about $132 a month. So what option is best for our family? Well, it depends on what is best for our family budget. But that's the way we will pay for college. Payment plan, parent loan, private loan. You know, it's also important to remember that the best plan to pay for a degree is to have a good academic plan. Our students now nationwide average 5 years completing their degree, and many times they do that because they start out. Full-time enrollment is 12 to 18 hours. Many times, most schools are flat rate tuition. 12 to 18 hours are the same price, but we kind of start out taking 12 hours hoping to kind of get off to a good start, get used to college. But if we do that a couple times, we'll end up buying a 5th year. And why is that? Well, most degree plans are 120 credit hours. So if we're going to finish that in 4 years or 8 semesters, we're going to have to average 15 hours a semester. And we say, well, we'll make that up in summer, but summer's not free. And if we don't live in that area, housing is not free for that summer either. So we want to make sure we average 15 credit hours as we're going through our degree plan. Timeline, especially for senior years, August to December, you're going to be doing your admission applications, and as much as you can, I know these are crazy times, but as much as you can, doing your college visits. By October 1st, you want to have created your FSA ID, so that beginning October 1st, you can file your FAFSA, and you want to do that as close to October 1st as you can. November through March is a big time to start receiving your award letters from school and making those evaluations of what schools are actually offering. If you've paid some deposits to school, May 1st is kind of that timeline to get your deposits back from the schools and really zero in on the school that your student's going to go to. May through August is that a lot of times those are the orientation times during the summer where you're going for freshman orientation, you're registering for classes, meeting your roommates, all kind of things like that. And August, mid-August there, it is time to move in. And that timeline will go faster than you can even imagine. So that is everything I would just, from my family to yours and our financial aid profession to you, I would just wish you the best of luck as you navigate this process. Know this, your high school counselors are there to help you navigate that, those private scholarships and those applications to college, your admission counselor and your financial aid counselor to help you navigate the school parts of the aid process and the federal aid processes. So please take advantage of that. Let us help you as much as we can. And we just wish you the very best as you navigate this process. Thank you very much.